And Sam, it's over to you, sir.
First,
Sorry, I muted you.
again.
Perfect time.
So, I think
I think your volume came up again on your, but go ahead.
volume came up.
Your volume on?
It's on minimum.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know.
Go ahead then.
Oh crap! Lost it again. Feedback here for some reason.
Is your volume or is Bruce's volume interfering with it since you're in the same room?
Okay. So welcome to all of you to our meeting. Not quite sure why we're having so much feedback problem.
Tell you what, mute yours and come over here.
Okay. Here. So here I am with Bruce, who I'll bring the chair over.
Here, take this.
Okay. Do that. Yeah, we won't have any feedback.
Now you are maintaining 6 feet separation, right?
Well, we got elbows here. So again, welcome to all of you who have joined us. It's a delight to have the people from out of state and out of the area be part of our meeting. We're going to think about this over time and see how we can incorporate this process into meetings in the future, because it's great to see you all from the outlying parts of our widespread chapter. The first thing I'd like to do is have us all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And Jeff, you're going to provide the flag, I believe. Is that correct?
We're going to give it a try.
Okay, well, here comes the flag. 1, 2, 3, where is it? I don't see it yet. I have it. Well, we imagine there's a flag there, okay? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God,
indivisible,
justice for all.
justice for all.
Okay, and now we're going to ask our Secretary, Charlie McVeigh, to provide the invocation for our meeting. Charlie?
Well, as we gather today, it's obvious that we have several battles going on, plus internal battles, whether they're against whatever enemy you're facing. But in trying to think about history, what I'm going to do is go back to President Roosevelt's D-Day prayer. So 76 years and 1 week ago, that President Roosevelt presented this prayer to the nation. And so if you'll bow with me. Almighty God, lead us straight and true. Give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith. They will need thy blessings. They will be sore tired by night and by day, without rest until the victory is won. They yearn but for the end of the battle, for their return to the haven of home. Some will never return. Embrace these, Father, and receive them. They are thy heroic servants into thy kingdom. And for us at home, whose thoughts and prayers are ever with them, help us, Almighty God, to rededicate ourselves in renewed faith in thee in this hour of great sacrifice. And let our hearts be stout to wait out the long travail, to bear our sorrows that may come, to impart our courage unto our troops, wheresoever they may be. Lead us to the saving of our country, and with our sister nations, into a world unity will spell a sure peace, a peace invulnerable to those schemings of unworthy men, and a peace that will let all men live in freedom, reaping the just rewards of their honest toil. Thy will be done, Almighty God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Charlie. Again, welcome to you all to our June luncheon and professional forum, and to our first ever chapter meeting conducted with Zoom. So much has happened since the last time we met in March. We had to forego the luncheon with Admiral Converse, COMSA PAC. We also had to see the Old Timers Luncheon be canceled, as well as the submarine birthday ball and all the activities that were scheduled for San Diego associated with the PAC Fleet Sailor of the Year. We're happy to see that process continue in Pearl Harbor, and we were delighted that some of the Sailors of the Year were actually from San Diego. We've been closely following, of course, the pandemic and the terrible toll it's been taking our nation, both in terms of people losing their lives or losing their health, as well as people losing their economic security. We've been monitoring all the demonstrations of the past week as well. Both of these events and situations are unsettling, and our hope is that we emerge eventually from all this with better conditions in both health and social justice. We ask you to continue to observe the CDC protocols for distancing. It seems to be working. I know it's a pain in the neck, but that's the only thing that we really have going for us right now to get this coronavirus out of the system. So with that, I'd like to open the meeting with a request for any old business. Is there any old business? Having seen no old business hands raised, I'm going to go to new business, which is the election. Historically and by bylaws, we conduct our election of officers at the June meeting, which is today. The membership has been given the opportunity to submit nominations from the floor via email over the last 3 weeks. We've received no other nominations than the ones that were proposed by the nominating committee. It says we received no other nominations. The slate proposed by the nominating committee is a slate we're going to ask you to vote on. And the slate is as follows. For president, Mr. Bruce Renes is currently serving as our vice president. For vice president, Captain Steve Andrus, USNR retired. Second vice president will be our Cub Server 11 Command Master Chief. That is actually a process in transition right now. And Jeff Hiscock is on his way to Kings Bay in about 3 days. In his relief, Nick Green, Command Master Chief Nick Green, formerly of Scranton, will be taking over. So that will be our second vice president situation as it clarifies later this week. For treasurer, we have Captain Keith Fargo, USN retired, currently serving as treasurer. And as secretary, we have Captain Charlie McVeigh, USN retired, currently serving as secretary. You must be a member of the chapter to vote, as Jeff has mentioned. And so now Jeff will explain the voting procedure.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. It's actually very simple. You should see a poll on your screen pretty soon here that lists the slate of the aforementioned people. Vote for yes is to vote for the entire slate. No, obviously, similarly, and abstention. Again, I would ask, we are asking that, that just chapter members vote. the Naval Submarine Pacific Southwest Chapter members vote. Others are welcome to observe but ask you not to vote. Does anyone see the poll on their screen yet? Bruce, you were the one that took it away. Can you put it back somehow? Okay, let me try this.
Hang on.
There it is.
Okay, I'm going to relaunch it.
We'll vote over there if you want. Yeah, okay.
Okay, I got 0 of 55 have voted. Does everyone see the poll on your screen? Just shake your heads yes if you do.
I voted.
Okay, I'll leave it up for about a minute.
Hey, Jeff, this is the captain. I noticed that I was unable to vote. Is that because I'm a panelist? Is Sharon a panelist on this feed?
Yeah, co-host, that may be.
Okay, if it comes to a tiebreaker, I'll be your guy then.
It's going to be close, I'm sure. Depending on you and Louisiana here. Actually, Bruce, as this polling is continuing, I am not seeing the numbers. It says 0 of 55. In other words, 0% have voted. Have you seen any change in that number?
Yeah, we've got 38 of 55 have voted.
Okay, I can't vote either because I'm a co-host, but
Yeah.
you got my vote.
Jeff, I can't vote, but all I see is the results.
And I don't see any of it.
Yeah,
so-
you're a co-host as well, Charlie, so it doesn't let co-host votes.
Understood.
Bruce, when the numbers stop racking up, go ahead and end the poll from your side there.
Yep. I'll go ahead and end it. We'll post the results.
Okay. And just because Bruce is running this doesn't mean it's rigged.
Sam is here to supervise. So does everybody see the results?
Actually, no, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Charlie, do you see them?
I do see the results.
Brien, are you seeing them on Sharon's computer?
We had them here. Yep.
I see the results. I see the results also.
It must be being out on that island, out away from everything that's causing it.
I'm going to have to get a different extension cable here.
Okay, so I think the results are in.
Can you take a screenshot of it or give us the results? Because I can't see it at all.
Yeah, I can take a screenshot. Hang on. Okay, so I have the screenshot. So I'll send it to you later, Jeff.
Okay, what's the number?
The number is, hang on a minute. 56, 36. The number is 36 yes, 2 abstained, and that's the end of it.
Okay,
So
back
no.
to you, Sam.
Well, congratulations to our new and continuing officers.
Andrews, you cheated death again.
Went deaf again?
He cheated death again. Steve and I worked together many years ago.
Steve, welcome to the group. I'm really glad you're going to be taking this responsibility on. I'd like to thank the club and tell you how honored I've been to be your president for the last 8 years. We have the president plaque that's been rejiggered to show. I'm trying to show that it has Bruce listed down as the president down at the bottom. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. Maybe we can get this. Okay. So that's the That's the illustrious plaque that has lots of stalwart submariners on this side over here that have been president, and we appreciate their efforts. Many of them are on the call today. As I say, I've been honored to be the president, and I'm eager to turn this wonderful job over to Bruce. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, and Bruce, you can press on with the rest of the program.
Okay, thanks, Sam, and thanks for all your service. It's been great having you as the president. I'm sure I share everybody else's deep appreciation for everything you've done. And a round of applause, even though you can't hear it from everybody, for Sam for all his service.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so on to the main speaker. Brien, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Well, let me do the introduction. I think most of you have probably met Brien before. He's been the base CO for what, almost 3 years now. He's a 1983 graduate of the Naval Academy, having entered the Navy from Casper, Wyoming. A career nuclear submarine officer, he served on USS Kamehameha and USS Ohio, before becoming the executive officer on USS La Jolla. As the commanding officer on USS Jefferson City, he deployed to the Arabian Gulf, and the ship won a meritorious unit citation and the Battle E award. Brien was recognized with the Rear Admiral Jack N. Darby Award for inspirational leadership and excellence. He served on the staff of COMSubron 11 under Gene Doyle, who was on there he is, Gene's there, and survived that experience to move on to other things. Then he became director of operational support for the chief of naval operations, and he hasn't been able to tell me anything about it unless I'm willing to be shot. So before assuming command of Naval Base San Diego. Among other medals and awards, Captain Dickson is authorized to wear the Legion of Merit. If you have questions for Brien during the presentations, go to the chat function and type up your question. Just send it to everybody, and then we'll address those after the completion of the presentation. And Brien, if you're ready to go, it's over to you.
I'm all set, Bruce. Thanks for that great introduction. Minor correction, I heard 1983, so it didn't take me 37 years to get here, or just 27. So
sorry about that.
So anyway, but thank you again for that warm introduction. And again, thanks for Sam's leadership of NSL. For my whole time as base CO, he's been the president. I think even when I left the last time, he was the NSL president. So I appreciate all he's done to make sure this organization has moved forward. So I heard an earlier question of what my topic is about, and Jeff kindly demurred to say that it was a secret. And so I started thinking I didn't have a title for this instruction, but something took me back to a time with Gene Doyle. After I found out I was going to be the base CO, Gene Doyle called me up and didn't even really say hello. He just yelled into the phone handset, "Don't go native." And so my topic today is I went native, but that's okay. And everything I'm going to talk about today is what happened on the base in terms of what we've accomplished and what my team's accomplished and how it's benefited either the people that work here or maybe you, because there's some things that hopefully you'll take advantage of if you're in the San Diego area, or how it's benefited the submarine force going forward. The last time I spoke to this group was in September of last year. This is hopefully kind of an add-on to some of the topics I touched on earlier in September. So if we jump to the next slide, I added a couple of these slides because I know we have some folks from out of town that maybe haven't, I don't know, Jeff, are you able to push the slides? I'm not seeing them.
I'm going to start them now.
Okay. So I'm going to just push them out there so folks can see what I'm talking about. So the first couple slides are just an overview of the base. So some of you have already seen these slides, but for those of you who aren't familiar with the San Diego area, I just wanted to add them. So I also recall a conversation with a Commodore when I was either a deputy or base CO that they commented that the base CO didn't seem to understand how important the submarines were to Navy Base Point Loma. And I wholeheartedly agreed with that because I was obviously a submariner. But after having this job for a while, I realized that actually the submarines are kind of a small part of what Navy Base Point Loma is about today. So we recognize it started primarily as a submarine base, but when we combined under the installation command structure, which the Navy stood up in the late 90s, and it's been kind of working through for the last 20 years, we also incorporated all of the research and development facilities which are on the peninsula, Harbor Drive Annex, which most of you know is the Fleet ASW base, and then Old Town Campus, which is used to be Spa Wars, and now it's Naval's headquarters. And because of that, my population that I'm responsible for, which is about 15,000, it's actually gone up, but I didn't change the slide because COVID's actually caused our total workforce number to drop precipitously. It is primarily folks that are engaged in research and development or acquisitions. That forms the biggest group of people. The second biggest group is students. There's a lot of students on the Fleet ASW Harbor Drive Annex campus going to fleet schools there. And then if you combine the maintenance workers and the squadron staff and the submarine crews that are home ported here, that forms my third biggest group. And then we also have a number of folks that work associated with a military Sea Lift Command, because military Sea Lift Command's West Coast headquarters is also on Point Loma. So that's what Point Loma really is about. And because submariners don't complain a lot, frankly, we don't have a lot of interaction a lot of times with our submarine team members because they usually are pretty self-sufficient and take care of themselves. Where it turns out people working in acquisitions are usually fairly needy in terms of pristine office environments that are my responsibility to provide. So that creates a lot of challenges. The other thing that's really interesting, I always point out to folks when I talk, and especially in the public, is, and especially when they're complaining about traffic and why don't order sailors to take public transportation, is that 2/3 of the population on Point Loma is actually civilian workforce. And so I don't really have the authority, nor do I have the authority over military to tell them to take public transportation. But it'd be essentially like a business telling their people they couldn't drive their car to work. It's just not really a starter. And that usually kind of ends the discussion about demanding people take public transportation. But it creates a lot of challenges in terms of security, the footprint we have. But it also has created a lot of neat kind of complexity in terms of interacting with different folks who are doing different businesses, and has been very broadening. Next slide. I also have some really great neighbors, and I always like to point this out as well to people who aren't familiar with the area, is we surround a veterans cemetery. So the Veterans Administration supervises the Cabrillo National Veterans Cemetery on the ridge, and it's definitely creates some very picturesque views. And a little known fact is it's by law that the grass has to stay green in a veteran cemetery. So no matter how bad California droughts get, that area is kept in premium condition, which I think is a great way to honor those who sacrifice for our country. And it's a pretty amazing facility. We provide some security for them, and we also provide some of their services in terms of through our NAVFAC organization. Water treatment facility is on the seaside of our peninsula. And then to the south of us is the Department of Interior that operates Cabrillo National Monument, where the old historic lighthouse is. And it's also a monument to Cabrillo, who was the first Westerner who was recognized to arrive in San Diego. The Coast Guard has a facility in the very tip, which is the new lighthouse. That's also where Slider's house from Top Gun fame is, which is depicted in the little picture there. And that's where the current sector headquarters commander's house is, along with a couple other senior Coast Guard officers. They have a small pier facility in Smuggler's Cove, which we'll have some shots of later. And they were a big partner in one of our big initiatives, which I'll talk to in a little bit. And then finally, Scripps Institute of Oceanography operates a facility where they service their ocean-going research vessels. That's also where the Flip is ported. And they have some of their facilities actually on Navy's Point Loma. Their classified facilities are on Navy's Point Loma. And so there's some good opportunities for the Navy, and it's one of those areas I think that we have not fully expanded as much as possible in terms of oceanographic research to improve our ASW capabilities, while we support just pure science and research that UCSD is focused on. Next slide. So the next slide kind of lays out my command vision. It's also a good roadmap for some of the things we're going to talk about in the presentation today. So the top, under the title, sustain the fleet, enable the fighter, and support the family, that's boilerplate scenic. The lines of effort are really the pillars of how I approach command. And I tried to center up on these pretty much every day and certainly every week to make sure that we were working in all three of these areas. The service thing I'll focus on there briefly is that in this COVID response, one of the things that's really come home to me is the service we provide our fleet in terms of childcare as a base. And so where a lot of other providers secured schools or childcare facilities, the Navy kept theirs open. I'm pretty proud of that because we've made a commitment to have a diverse workforce, including women serving our force. That meant we made a commitment to provide childcare. So we certainly limited to just mission essential folks, but a lot of those are security people, have to have their children in some sort of daycare facility, and we still provided that. We had a tangential case of a parent getting diagnosed with COVID-19, and the protocols at the time required us to shut the facility down for 14 days. But I was very proud of our child development staff that developed an innovative approach to ensure that we maintain safety, and we were able to open the facility a whole week earlier. And that set an example for other facilities as well, so that we're more resilient because people are going to keep getting COVID-19, and we do need to respond responsibly, but we were able to do it faster than before. We have a number of protocols for cleaning, and then we also limited the number of customers to make sure we maintain safety. So that's one of the many ways that we serve the fleet, providing MWR facilities, fitness centers. Unfortunately, a lot of those things are secured right now while we're still in the response to COVID-19. Building is going to be the predominant focus of the rest of my talk, so I'll kind of hold those to the next few slides. And then the protection piece, we certainly have invested a lot in that, and I have one of my final talking points is kind of how the Navy at large, specifically through a base commander's view, has responded to COVID-19, and then to describe how it's affected both our shore facilities and our seagoing units differently. So I applied attributes. Our CNO, previous CNO, Admiral Richardson, put out 4 attributes he wanted every sailor to have: initiative, toughness, integrity, and accountability. So I thought those were pretty good, so I adopted those as my own. Then I added 2 onto it as innovation and connection. And hopefully you'll see some themes of innovation work through this, and also how connection helped us move some challenging projects forward. And the last part of the slide focuses on social media. This is an area that I don't think I achieved my goals in command. I really had a very optimistic view of being effective in this area. And what I discovered is that managing social media from an organizational perspective is certainly more challenging than managing your own social media account. And it is a very labor-intensive business. So I am very thankful, though, that my public affairs officer, Sharon Sampino, has definitely embraced this, and we've made some strides in this area just recently. We posted a lot more video content, and we made the transition, and this is an area that we have shown some good innovation, in that we used to put out a paper newsletter. Had a very limited distribution. It was primarily focused to the leadership of the various tenant commands, and it was fairly labor intensive for really not a lot of draw. During my tenure here, we transitioned to that to a PDF, and we focused the audience to be all our tenants and anybody that was, maybe a neighbor in terms of what was going on in the base, a little more human interest sort of thing. That had a little bit better contact with folks, but we've since secured that, and we've invested all our energy and primarily into Facebook, although we do a little bit in Twitter and a little bit into Instagram as well. But primarily based on the staffing we have, we've just focused on Facebook. And I think we're getting a lot better connection with our tenant commands, and we get a lot more feedback. And those of you remember when you'd have a new sailor showing up to your ship, one of the things that's changed dramatically because of Facebook is, we still send off dutifully the message to the command they're coming from saying, hey, welcome aboard. And, for your junior sailors, God knows that message probably never gets down to them. What's happening now is that sailors will reach out and send us a Facebook message saying, hey, I'm having trouble getting in touch with my sponsor. Not just people that are signing to the base, but to our tenant commands as well. And then someone in our first lieutenant's office or admin office or our public affairs team reaches out to that particular department or command, and then we create that connection. So it's actually a meaningful solution for something I think was always a challenge, no matter what the command's desires were. Okay, so I'm going to jump into first project we've worked on. So next slide. This is known as Building 158. And I first became aware of Building 158 when Howard Warner, the base CO at the time, this was when I was still a squadron deputy, walked me around the base, and I think he was brand new in command. And we walked by this building. This is behind the parking garage, and it's right down the street from my office. It's on Sylvester Road. This building began its life in 1908 when the Army built the base. It was the only brick structure on the base, and it's one of the oldest brick buildings in San Diego. It was originally intended to be the base post exchange, so think the commissary, the exchange, all kind of in one. And it also had a life as the gymnasium for the base for a while as well. It eventually ended up being used by Submarine Squadron 11 as the headquarters for Submarine Squadron 11, and that was in that capacity up till 1996. In 1997, during BRAC, they obtained funding to renovate the building. The contractor was assigned the work, found problems during the construction phase, and then promptly declared bankruptcy and defaulted on the contract. And then the building sat for over 20 years, pretty much in a condition worse than I'm showing you in these pictures. So Howard showed me the building. He said, hey, this is tragic. It shouldn't be like this. And he wanted to convert it into a museum at the time. So when I came back in command, I said, hey, Howard, what's going on with the building? And he wasn't as joyful back then. After 3 years being base CO, I can now understand his perspective. And he said, hey, there's no money for museums. It's just not going to happen. But hey, you might want to try to see if you can convert it into a new headquarters for your security team because their building's not adequate. So I thought, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And fortunately, I went to the right staff meeting at the region, and it was the only time ever at any meeting I've been here in 3 years, they talked about some free money, basically manna from heaven, called demolition money. And so the Navy doesn't usually fund demolitions. It's just periodically they put money out. And there was literally tens of millions of dollars available in 2018 for demolition. Well, it turns out demolition money can also be used to do consolidation. So if you have lots of buildings and you just want to turn it into one building, you could consolidate an existing structure. So this is a great example that you'll hear a lot of people say negative stuff about NAVFAC, but they have some really talented people. And they were able to turn into one project to destroy two barracks buildings that were needed to be demolished and consolidate my security office, which was in 4 different buildings, down to 2. And they were able to use that to allow us to do this renovation. This renovation will be completed in August of this year. So we are getting close. I was hoping my change of command would happen after this. And in fact, I was even considering maybe even hosting here because I was so proud of this project. And it's really our connection to the history of the base. So it's going to make a much better facility. The locker rooms, the investigation rooms are things that right now we really don't even have for our security team. And what we have is very substandard. It's going to have new environmental controls for the building. And it's really going to set the base up for at least the next 50 years for a really good headquarters for our security detachment. So hats off to NAVFAC and moving that forward. And it's been pretty exciting. On the next slide. Smuggler's Cove. So this is a slide that I showed from the 2019 talk. And I really like to talk about this because to me, my favorite part about it is really kind of the people aspect of it. So I'll start here and say, if we go to the next build here, go one slide in. So this is pretty close to what the beach looked like when I took command here. And I remember as a JO that there was a lot more sand here in the 90s. And I recently heard another environmentalist talking about it. And he said that in his talk that the beach actually took its biggest hit in the 1980s. There was a really bad El Nino year that year, and a storm basically just sucked all the sand out of Smuggler's Cove. That was what he said. But I thought it got worse in the 20 years that I've been here, to the point where at high tides, most of the beach was inaccessible. And you can't really see it in this picture of the seawall, but of the 3 stairways through the seawall leading down to the beach, 2 of them required about a 6-foot drop to the beach floor, and those stairwells were essentially rendered unusable. So I had the idea when I was, I think, still on a submarine, is like, well, why don't we just put some sort of embankment underwater in to hold the sand that we still have so it doesn't keep leaving, and then add more sand back in. You know, somewhere there's got to be sand, we could bring sand in. And I was told when I was on a submarine as well, you know, the base, and well, environmentalists won't let us do it anyway, because, you know, environmentalists won't let us do anything. And that, I'll be frank, that kind of colored the way I saw the problem. So my first week in command, I had a guy named Mitch Perdue come to my office, and he was the region's head of environmental protection. And he was also a biologist. And I needed to have a meeting with him to set a conference up. And I really had a negative attitude approaching that meeting. And my first statement to him was, hey, why won't you let me build my beach? And he, you know, it's really not the way to start a meeting. But he was very gracious and heard me out on what I wanted to do. And his immediate response was, well, I love that idea. We should do that. And I was kind of taken aback by that. But he kind of put a lot of nuts and bolts in the idea of, it was turning out at that exact same time, we were demolishing the old fuel pier that is here on Navy Base Point Loma. And because of that, they had all this rubble that was still part of the old fuel pier that they had to dispose of. Well, that has a cost to it. But if we just stored it on the base and then used that rubble to create the rock wall that I was proposing, it would be a lot less expensive than, you know, resourcing our own materials. And it also saved on the disposal fee. So we were able to put that in place to stop the removal of that material, and we just stored it on the base. So that was kind of like the first step. So to me, I was like, well, we're halfway there. Turns out it was a lot more complicated than that. But Mitch really saw this project through, and he unfortunately passed away in last November, actually November of 2017, right at Thanksgiving time. And so fortunately, the region staff kind of kept the project moving. And the first step was put the rock wall in place. That was obvious. But unfortunately, we didn't have money for that. But we did have an opportunity with the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard needed to get rid of some sand that was destroying their floating piers here in Point Loma, and they needed to get rid of it quick. So urgency spawned their efforts, and we saved them a lot of money on disposal of their sand by simply depositing on the beach. So this is the first step you're seeing in the picture right now of adding to my beach. So you'll imagine my surprise when I went down there and saw them restoring the beach, and this is what it first looked like. I thought, hey, we're going in the wrong direction. It seems like we're getting less beach as they dug it up. But the next slide, we'll go to the next thing. So soon we started gaining sand, and we got more and more sand. And the next slide. We ended up with too much sand. So then a few weeks later, I go back, and this is the picture of my pristine beach. Is the sand had literally mounted higher than the seawall. And I started talking to my environmental team that maybe we had overshot the target a little bit. Next slide. But they kind of smoothed it out a little bit. And so for the first Cabrillo Fest in about 30 years, we had a really good looking beach. And this is Cabrillo reenacting his landing back on the beach, and the sand was back. But we still didn't have the rock wall in place, so we started the risk of all this sand just going right back into the dredge sites, which would have defeated the whole purpose, and then that would have really upset the Coast Guard. So the next stage was getting that rubble back. So we'll see the slide pop up here. And this is kind of some pictures of what it looked like when it was stored up on the old fuel pads where the old fuel farm is. And then next slide. We started placing it in, and oh, by the way, we didn't quite move quick enough, so we had to dredge the sand back up and put it back on the beach. I'll go to the next slide. And we started putting the pieces in. So here's the dredge crew this winter placing that barricade underwater in. And then we'll go to the final slide here. Oh, and then the last piece, and I didn't really talk to this. So why was environmental so interested in me getting a recreational beach back? Well, it turns out the enabler of this entire project was actually the environmentalists. So where I thought that they were this block to moving forward on something I wanted, they were actually the reason we were able to do it. And for many bays, especially in the Pacific, and I'm not sure about worldwide, but they suffer a problem of a lack of oxidation in the water. So there's not enough free oxygen in the water for fish species to live. So you have to plant different sorts of plant life to help with that. And here in San Diego, eelgrass is a key enabler to adding more oxygen back into the environment. So the Navy, since we installed the carrier piers a few years back, has been very focused on supporting eelgrass. And that's how we did an offset, an environmental offset. So the environmentalists allowed us to build the carrier piers to support the Navy's mission. The Navy became big eelgrass farmers. And so we have planted eelgrass in the South Bay in huge banks. So we have acres of this stuff, and we planted more than we needed to. And that enables us to basically do exchanges so that we can essentially allow people to borrow our eelgrass fields for offsetting their projects. That enabled us to not pay money for a BRAC project, which is the canal that leads up to MCRD. That allowed BRAC to send me money to support the beginnings of this project. And it really has been about adding additional eelgrass to the San Diego Bay, which has enabled this project to move forward. So there's, you see an underwater picture of some of that very precious eelgrass. The next slide, you'll see some more eelgrass farmers. So if you want to know what an eelgrass farmer looks like, go to the next slide. There they are. That's our eelgrass team. And that's for them. And that was just a couple weeks ago, them putting the eelgrass in. So this last week, we finally opened up the beach again. Next slide. And this is what it looks like today. And that led to one happy Bay CO. I took my family down there on Sunday, and we got fire pits back in place. So this is a place that you can do some social distancing right now here in San Diego. You can launch your kayaks, canoes, whatever non-motorized water vehicles you want to take out of here. You're more than welcome to use the beach again. So we anticipate, because of that rock wall being in place, this is going to be like this for many years to come. And that eelgrass is going to be there supporting the base, the bay health for a long time to come as well. So to me, it's a great example of, I actually went to parties is where I ran into people, whether it was the Coast Guard, the BRAC people, the environmental folks, is that I would constantly at these social events bring this story up, and I connected more and more people that enabled the whole project to fit together. And I think it was an innovative approach to helping solve a lot of problems. So I'm pretty proud of that. On a smaller scale, next slide. Oh, there's me, happy Bay CO, is the marina restoration. So our marina was disassembled in 2014 to support the fuel pier build. We had to move the marine mammals that support the Navy mission. We had to move them out of the way because there was too much noise due to the construction project. And they were placed at the marina on Harbor Drive Annex. So when they pulled out in 2017, that started our project, which has taken most of my command tour to restore both pier facilities, both at the old marina, which is where we have 2 vacation cabins, and then also at the new marina, which is where most of our slips are. So as soon as we come fully out of the COVID-19, we're going to be able to establish our recreational boating. So you'll be able to rent a sailboat. You'll also be able to launch kayaks and other watercraft out of here. If you happen to own a sailboat or a powerboat and you wish to have it moored at one of our slips, we still have some slips open, but a lot of them had already been taken back up again. So this is fully viable again. Another piece that my community service team came up with, and you see it in the blue box, is the new RV park. And so this is one of those ideas, as Bay CO, they first approached me with, and I'm like, oh, RV park, I don't know about that. But after they kept talking about it and seeing how it was nearly free, it became an easy yes. So that block you see in blue is actually a parking lot, and we just striped it differently so you can park your RV there. I try to limit how long you can stay there because we're not trying to create an alternate housing area. It really is intended to be for recreational folks that are coming out. But there is no more spectacular view of the bay than this RV park, and you can stay there relatively cheap. And then just this year, we received approval to put in power and fresh water. We still will not have a sewage drop, and that's partially by plan because we, again, want people to take off from there. But we have showers available in the marina, and so it's kind of like one of these hidden gems. So I certainly like maybe submarine league members who have RVs to know about it. And it's a great place to, if you're vacationing, to stay here Navy Base Point Loma. All right, next slide. All right, so piers and dredging. So this is a little bit more about, you know, our support for our submarine team. So this graphic is pretty much the condition of our berths right now. You see pretty simple there is that if it's in yellow, it's 680 only. That makes sense. Go to the 688 base. And then greens are areas that are deep water drafts. On the Mike Pier, the middle pier, you'll see that is always, well, it hasn't always been, but it was dredged to be a deep water berth. But we didn't really dredge the approaches to it. So that caused two problems. Even 688s that were berthed there started experiencing problems with fouling issues. And then for a deep draft submarine like an SSBN to go in there, they could only approach it during certain tidal conditions. And that certainly didn't make the submarine force want to use that. So what that did is it drove all of our visiting submarines to the South Pier. And then that had the effect is we didn't do maintenance on the South Pier because we always wanted to leave that berth open. And so what that did was drive all of our heavy industrial work up to the North Pier. And guess where we typically want to handle weapons? So you got it North Pier and the outer Mike Pier. And so that caused a lot of conflict between our maintainers and our weapons handlers. And it drove a lot of, just bluntly conflict on the base. So my approach and strategy has been is to work on dredging, because to me that was a key enabler. And then also to dredge so that we'd be ready to support Virginia class when they come. So right now we have not dredged any of the other berths to Virginia class, but we have a funded project to move forward on that. So we will be able to move and dredge all of our berths for Virginia. So we'll be capable for that. And then I said funded, we have a project. That one's not particularly funded right now, but we already completed a project, which you see the pictures throughout the slide. Well, we did dredge the approaches to the Mike Pier. So today we can berth once the charts are updated, because no one's going to do it without the charts being updated. But once the charts are updated, we're going to be able to host visiting submarines on the Mike Pier. And then that'll allow our PNS team to preferentially schedule their availabilities in the South Pier. And that will enable those folks to travel less distance, will actually make their work a lot more efficient. And then the other piece I want to mention on this slide is on the South Pier, you can see 633. Old squadron alums know that it's the squadron building. It was always intended to be the PNS maintenance building. Behind that is a NR&D building. And then behind that is a Quonset hut, which is my port ops building. In that particular area, we have a site approval, which is moving forward now to create a new MILCON project where we're going to add an additional maintenance building. Now, unfortunately, with the way we do military construction in the Navy these days, it's going to take minimum 5 years and probably closer to 10 years for that building to be built. But we have a plan moving forward that both the shipyard and the base agreed to, which has been, it took a number of years to come to that, but we got through it. I'm excited because that is going to be a useful timeline for us to be ready to support Virginia. Without that particular maintenance facility, this base will not be able to support Virginia class maintenance. And if we get it done a little bit quicker, it's going to definitely streamline maintenance processes for the 688s that are home ported here. And to me, it's a really important thing to keep the base viable for future submarine home porting here as well. So again, it's something that it shouldn't have kept surprising me, but one thing about being a base CO is everything takes a little longer than you like it to. That certainly took a long time to get to yes on that, but moving forward, we're pretty excited that that's going to move forward. And now we just got to battle through the MILCON process, but that usually just takes 3 to 5 years, and we'll have a new maintenance building. Okay, next slide. All right, so the other thing I want to talk to is on piers. I include this because I'm just kind of amazed at some of this stuff. We'll talk about shore power. So in those 3 small piers, and I say small because they're small compared to what we have at Navy Base San Diego, where they have 14 piers, we have 205 shore power breakers. And I'm sure some smarter people on the line than me probably know this is true, but have you ever seen one of our shore power bunkers, and it's depicted in the middle pier, you see where the cables plug in. And I always kind of thought that inside that cement structure, and those are circled, and the blue circles in the graphic below it, that's where the breakers were for the shore power. And I've seen breakers inside submarines, so it's like it all makes sense. That's where they're at. Well, it turns out that's not true at all. There's no breaker at all in that little cement structure. But all our piers had the same design. Is between those two blue ovals, underwater, if you look to the picture to the right, you'll see a little blue shading underneath that structure. There's a vault that runs all the way across the pier, and that vault goes down 30 feet. So a majority of the vault is actually underwater. And if you go to the bottom of that vault, you'll be in a large room. And in that room is filled with very, very big breakers, much bigger. And you'll see in the crane picture, and we for perspective there, you can see the people. The breakers are about as big as a person. Those are actually the 205 breakers that allow us to power submarines at Naval Base Point Loma. Well, on most of you are probably familiar with sequestration, which I'm having trouble saying right now. But that caused us to not do proper maintenance for about a decade. And that's not just Navy Base Point Loma, that's all our bases, had serious problems. Unfortunately, that couldn't have come at a worse time for Navy Base Point Loma's shore power breakers. Shore power breakers, it turns out, have a 25 to 35 year lifespan before refurbishments. So they're not really well suited for a traditional submarine maintenance program where, you know, every 5 years you're pulling them things out for refurb. And unfortunately, now, in fact, one of their kind of blind spots is they don't really have a great preventative maintenance program. It's more kind of when things start going haywire, they investigate. Well, they investigated all right and discovered that they had a significant problem with a lot of the shore power breakers, and they were needing periodic maintenance. So we have made it through a majority of those 205 breakers. So that's a good news story. It started primarily on Howard Warner's watch, but we've kept moving forward and doing load testing. So it's very important to me that we answer the fleet's need for that. And then the next stage of our process, which will be taken up by my relief, we are looking at bringing in a adjustment to our substation. So we'll be able to park some big CAT diesels on semi-tractor trailer trucks, and we'll create what's called a microgrid. So when we lose shore power, like SDG&E stops providing power to the base, we will be able to then auto switch off of that, start up those big CAT diesels, and then power our piers at limited power. And that will enable us to do two things. One, it'll prevent having to require submarines to have two sets of shore power cables topside. So that'll prevent littering up our piers. And then it will enable us to save a lot of money that we spend right now doing individual contracting for those CAT diesels. So we think that's going to be a good solution moving forward. That's just in its infancy, but I'd like to do a little gift for my relief so he can battle through something on his watch. The last thing I'll talk to is Yokohama fenders. We call them Yokohama fenders. It's on the same slides. We'll just jump back. It's that black hot dog shape that's there. So some of you old timers probably remember just having camels. Well, camels are maintenance nightmares. So that's why the Navy doesn't use them anymore. It's super expensive to maintain. And we've gone to Yokohama fenders, and they're called Yokohama fenders because they're made in Yokohama, Japan. And only one supplier right there in Yokohama provides all the fenders for the U.S. Navy. Well, the Navy Base Point Loma Public Works team spearheaded an effort working with NAVSEA engineers to find a second supplier out of Korea. So it took us about 2 years of battling through it, but we have the new fenders were installed this year, and that enables the Navy to then have competitive bids for these fender systems, which in the long term should save us a lot of money. The other thing about these fenders that I didn't fully appreciate is for them to work correctly, you need a metal backing plate behind them. We just stopped doing that on Point Loma. We just said, hey, we don't have money for these metal backing plates. They'll work okay without them. That caused some of our fender systems to reach failure criteria sooner than they would have. So we were able to replace all the fender back plates. We've installed new fenders for the ones that were failing, and now we're upgrading our older systems to save some maintenance money. And so on both shore power and the actual mooring systems we bring our submarines up against, we've made some significant strides to make big improvements there for submarines. And I'm really excited about it because I think it helped that we had money. Budget certainly was helpful. But when I was a CO, we literally couldn't fix one of the freshwater risers to a submarine berth. So that submarine that berthed there could not get, not pure water, but fresh water down to the submarine. I'm very glad to say that we've made it past that, and we're making further strides to make the pier structures better for our submarine crews. Next slide. All right, so COVID, I'll talk briefly about this. So I'm sure many of you have questions. We'll probably get to more of it in Q&A. But in March, when it looked like COVID-19 was, kind of really hit us as a nation, that it was going to be pretty significant. On March 17th, by my memory, that's when California shut down. And so about a week before that, we as a Navy started taking a serious look at what our response was going to be. One of the things I'm glad we had in place is that I had gone to a telecom network, so Lieutenant Command leadership could basically call into this bridge in an ad hoc way and get an immediate update on some particular situation. I had envisioned using it if we had an earthquake or a terrorist attack. It turned out the first time we used it in a real world scenario was actually COVID-19. And I felt that it really helped us to disseminate the information across our 70 tenant commands more efficiently than what I was observing from other bases. And enabled me to help our tenant commands make their own decisions. And that was kind of my philosophy approaching this and pretty much any other crisis is, if you just have me try to solve all the problems for the whole base, you're going to get the solution you get, and it's probably not going to be very optimum. We've really focused on sharing information in a crisis scenario, so each tenant command CO makes his own decision. And I think that really worked out well for Point Loma, especially in the early days of our response. Now, you heard me talk at the early part of this discussion that we have a lot of civilians work here. We do a lot of acquisitions, do some research and development. Obviously, some of that's classified. But it turned out that a huge portion of that civilian workforce was equally viable as teleworkers. So Point Loma had a huge advantage over other Navy bases in that we could quickly pivot to telework. So within 2 weeks, had shut down many of my gates because those people just didn't come to work anymore. We probably, in some of our tenant commands, went down to removed 75% of the on-base workforce, either was allowed just to stay home or teleworked exclusively. And my parking lot that you can see below my office, I mean, to me, that's one of the testaments of what I'm talking about is it's significantly lower the number of people driving on base. So that was a win with the neighbors. They're very thankful we have less traffic. And when we come out of COVID-19, that'll be one of the things that my relief has to manage is, hey, why do we have such bad traffic? Because I'm sure they won't remember what it was like before we had COVID-19. I think as a Navy, for a lot of our civilian workforce, when we talk about a new normal, I actually think it's going to become a good new normal. I think about my public affairs officer. I'm going to definitely push for my relief to keep her on. She does a lot of telework. I think she's actually more effective some days being a telework person because she does a lot of social media work. She can do that from anywhere. And she saves the tax because of the way San Diego housing works. The closest she can get a house for her and her parents, she watches out for her two parents, is about an hour away. So she pays a tax every day of 2 hours. So on the days she teleworks for the base, even if she gives us half of that tax back, you can see we're getting a productivity gain. And she's just one example of many that we're excited about how telework can actually make our Navy more effective going in the future. Now, that has no impact on our ships, right? We're not going to telework a crew and they still got to come to work. But you can see from their perspective, it's still a win because if we have a lot of our workforce teleworking, that means the loads are less impacted. That means that sailors' commute is easier as well. And I also see a mega trend is that there's going to be a potential that people living in high cost areas like San Diego, I think there's going to be a transition. They kind of move out to elsewhere. They can earn similar money elsewhere. I think there's going to be kind of a push to move people out of impacted metropolitan areas. And I think the Navy will benefit because obviously we can't change where our bases are. They have to be near the sea. So within about 2 weeks of this developing, we were directed from higher authority to shut down all base services that were voluntary, including our fitness centers, our MWR facilities, barbershops. So anything that wasn't mission essential for operational units went away. And I think that was appropriate given the unknowns. But I remember remarking to my boss as she was commenting on the challenges of doing that, I told her, I think it's going to be much harder to come out of this than it has been to get into it. And that has certainly proved to be somewhat prophetic. Unfortunately, where we're at today is that local indications, I think, would provide any sort of rational decision maker looking at what information we have available would be that certainly for our active duty service members, restoring things like base gyms, some of our MWR activities, some of our food venues makes a lot of sense because our community is opening those same services up, our barbershops. They're going to go use those facilities. So any risk they're entailing, we could probably lower their risk by bringing them back onto the base. But our Navy's strategy has changed a lot in the time I've been in the Navy, and we are a lot more centralized decision makers. So where I would have had the latitude to make that decision before, those decisions now are made at the Fleet Forces 4-star level. And so we advocate opening some facilities up, and it's got to go all the way up. So far, to my knowledge, only one base has received permission to do partial openings of those services, and that's Fallon. It's in Nevada, and they had almost no cases. So our Navy's taking a very cautious approach. And, you know, for good measure, our focus is our deployed units, and our deployed units have taken a much different stance because they had to, because teleworking was not an option. And so you see very aggressive sequestering of their crews. So Squadron 11 is managing for one of their deployers. They're actually sequestering that ship on our piers. They brought down some housing. I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan of that, but in this particular situation, we agreed to it for this one situation. So that whole crew, including what would normally be their hot rackers that we put up in a hotel if the crew is stuck on the ship, they are all on the pier. They're not leaving the pier for the period of their sequestering period, and then they're going to go on deployment after they've completed that. And that is similar to what surface ships and aviation squadrons have been doing. They do extensive testing, so they test every crew member before they enter that period. They go through that period, then they do another test to as much as possible prove that that crew that is leaving has no possibility that there's any COVID on board. But you can imagine that is putting a very large tax on those units. I mean, think about your own deployments, all the times you deployed and all the things you were worried about that had to interact with people outside of your ship before you left. I mean, just think about the crew members that are kind of in those tough family situations. And wow, we are putting a very big load on the system. Now, like any problem, there's hidden consequences and symptoms of that, which I don't think our Navy has fully recognized or observed yet. But I think in the next few months, we're going to see more and more of those consequences coming out. So how we respond to that is going to be very, very challenging for the Navy going forward. I take a lot of questions about catering facilities because Navy Submarine League was one of our most valuable customers for our catering facility here on subbase. Based on what I'm getting from Fleet Forces Command, I definitely don't think there's any way we'll be able to restore services. Once we have authority to do partial reopening of our facilities, then I anticipate we're going to be on a program that we've already laid out that about every 2 weeks, we will open up more facilities. And unfortunately, catering is probably on step, 4 or 5 of that. And as we do each of those steps, I just nominally say 2 weeks. I anticipate that, we'll get some indications and say, whoa, we got to slow down a little bit, or maybe we could speed up. So, I think it could potentially take another 8 weeks after we get the go signal before we are back into catering. So there was some discussion of a September event. I think that isn't necessarily impossible, especially if we talked more about it, maybe an outdoor venue. But it's not going to be a slam dunk getting to yes there, but it's one of those challenges we work through. All right, so that kind of takes care of the COVID challenges. And we jump to the next slide. Just highlight some of our annual events. Again, this is kind of, thrown in for folks that aren't familiar with Point Loma, but it is also an opportunity for me to say how thankful I am for what we call the N9 team. That's our community services team. And also our security department. Our security department will usually work extra shifts to support having the community come on the base for for Cabrillo Festival. Freedom Fest is our 4th of July celebration. That's for only people that have base access. Battle of San Diego Bay is a partnership we have with the House of Spain as they do some really simple reenactments. And then we also do other events, the Trick or Treat Village, Curse Cove, and Wreaths Across America. Tricks or Treats Village is an N9 program, an MWR program we do for sailors and their family. Wreaths Across America is a partnership we do with the Veterans Administration and then the organization Wreaths Across America to put wreaths on the tombs in the Veterans Cemetery. So these are activities the base supports normally. They're all activities that have been impacted one way or another by the COVID response. So how these things will change is still kind of up in the air. But they are kind of signature events for Navy Base Point Loma things. I'm really proud of what our team's done to support in these areas. All right, I think my final slide. So hopefully it'll be a question I can answer beforehand. I've alluded this will be my final NSL presentation. And so where am I going next? I think I'm probably one of the most blessed naval officers ever. I have never had a detail that I look back on badly. I've always been very appreciative of detailers. They've really hooked me up. And I called my detailer at the time, Brien Davies, to retire. And I was planning on staying here in San Diego. And he said, okay, sounds like you had a good plan. But how about you just hear me out? I got an option for you. So he told me about a job in Louisiana. My family lives in Texas. My wife's family lives in Alabama. I was immediately interested. And he wanted me to go down and be a professor of naval science down there. So that's my next assignment. I'll be down there for 3 years. I'm very thankful for those orders. And especially now with COVID-19 going on and 4 kids, this is nice to have a little bit of certainty as I move out for the next phase of my life. So what's this picture about? Well, I'm packing up the house and I found a box of my old woodworking magazines. And I didn't realize why Russ always looked familiar to me, but I'd seen his picture in a woodworking magazine from long ago. So this article that he is featured in is him doing some steam bending of some wood. And I did a lot of woodworking before I was an XO. So this is kind of my future. I'm going to definitely check out this article, build my own steam building kit, and see if I can bend up some chairs myself. So I didn't see Russ in the session, but if you see him, if he's not in, just let him know I gave him a shout out. Certainly very impressive what he can do in terms of wood construction, and his impact is pretty impressive. And then my final comment is really a thanks to the Navy Submarine League. So the award that was mentioned in my bio is the Navy Submarine League. I think that really helped me in my post-command tour, and I'm very thankful for the recognition. I also tell you how I really got involved in Navy Submarine League is when I was first base CO here, my first Commodore was Rich Correll, Admiral Correll. And, I don't think any Commodore you want to say no to, but Admiral Correll was not the kind of Commodore, he'd probably be the last Commodore you'd want to say no to. He could be intense. And so he called me up one day and goes, hey, there's this Navy Submarine League thing, and you and your wardroom will support it. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And so I went down, and I was super impressed with how much contact I had with so many different people, which provided such a wonderful perspective on the submarine force. And I'll tell you, as I look back on my success, I think certainly in command, I greatly value my experience with the Navy Submarine League. It's been especially wonderful being part of this community in San Diego. It's one of my top 3 favorite things about San Diego. It's one of the things I'm going to be most sad to leave. I very much value this community, and thank you very much for supporting me both as a CO and as the base CO here at Point Loma. With that, I'm open to your questions.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to close the brief so that I can look at the chat questions that may have come up. But while I'm doing that, I'd like to say great job. And we are very appreciative of you spending many tours here. We've enjoyed having you at each one. Okay, looking through now that I can see the chats.
Say, Brian, can you see the questions in the chat room?
I don't see them. So
Okay.
What I will do is I will pick some and read them. JJ Mackin from Colorado says, when will your change of command be?
Okay, great question. Hey, Bruce, I got smarter instantly right there. So I can see the questions now. So, but first question, it's going to be July 24th. And so we're going to get the announcement out. I owe the guest list to my admin officer this week before I take my family out to Louisiana. So I'll be gone for the next couple weeks in Louisiana, and then in July I'll be back to do turnover, and then July 24th is my change of command. How that's going to work, I don't know yet. I'm envisioning having a small ceremony. So I say that I think about 50 to 100 people I think might be in the doable range at that time period. We'll also definitely have a Facebook Live session going. So please keep your calendars open if you're so inclined. 10 a.m. on the 24th of July. I'm pretty confident that time will stick. All right. So Jeff, I'll just step through the questions if that's okay, or unless you want to read them to me, however you want to do it.
I want to take another one from JJ Mackin because it's one that I had. When do you expect the first Virginia class submarines to be home ported at the base?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a moving target. And what's fascinating is, okay, it's a new submarine, but what's really, I think, driving the dates is the old submarines. And what's driving the old submarines is our, well-documented backlog in shipyard capability. So I think right now we're publishing 2026. I think that's probably a good working date, even if it's off by a year or two. And this base will be a 688 base, and I anticipate we will have the last 688s in the force. And the longer those stay viable, and they're staying viable because we're taking longer to get them in the shipyard, so it's kind of extending their lives by default, I think will delay Virginia's coming here.
Okay. And if you can read them, I'll let you pick and choose the ones you want to answer.
All right. So I'm not picking and choosing. I'm just going to start at the top. Hopefully that's the newest one. Okay, actually those aren't questions. Hold on a second. When do you okay, there we go. Okay, the commander of Kirkland Air Force Base here in Albuquerque has banned military retirees from using the PX commissary due to COVID. Is that the case in San Diego? Ooh, this is being recorded. So I'll do what somebody did to me one time. I think you should talk to an IG about that. That's what I think you should do. Or you should call your congressman about that. So that's not our policy here. Now, and I don't have a commissary or a full exchange, so I'm in a better situation than that Basio. So it's easy for me to say. But if I did have those facilities and I was following my region's guidance, what I would do is I'd have separate hours. I would have certain hours specifically timed to when the supply trucks come. What those areas are, why they're doing that is because of the breakdowns in our supply chains as a nation. What's happening is a lot of our exchanges are being overloaded by demand, and our active duty folks are at their work. And so when they get off of work, the people that didn't have a set schedule, retiree folks, have already bought up all this stuff. Now, there's probably different ways you could, sort of resource that or adjust to that. But how that base CO is doing is he's just saying, hey, you can't come on the base. I know what El Centro did was, that's a Navy base out in El Centro. They just had certain hours, and they made sure that those hours were active duty. The supply trucks show up, active duty only for a few hours, and then they open it up to the rest of the population. And it's also important to create social distancing, right? Because our more vulnerable retiree populations, we don't want around young sailors who may have gone to the rave last night. So there's smart ways to handle it. And I think that, perhaps they could think about that at the base you're near. But you didn't hear that from me. Medical question related to our fleet. In light of the changing medical knowledge requirements, the onboard corpsmen serving operational boats, with women now serving with unique medical potential concerns with COVID risk, has there been any subsequent change in the medical credentialing requirements for those serving our crews at sea? I can't speak to the specifics on that, but I'll tell you that from my interactions with Navy Health Research Center and the leadership of our medical centers and the chats I've had with the senior corpsmen on the Squadron 11 staff, speaking specifically about COVID-19, they are very sensitive to changes in protocols and meeting the science. There's, an aspect of different genders on board. I have no forehand knowledge on that, but I just know that we did this in a very responsible way. So I'm sure they got additional training in that particular area. And the last thing I'll say about it in terms of COVID-19, political and medical, think about those as two spheres that you can tackle this COVID problem from. A lot of our Navy's response is really an answer to the political side. So, I've heard some medical folks talk about, hey, these would be appropriate protocols. I think they've been somewhat frustrated by some of our stance, but the reality is there is a political component to this, and people do not want to take political risk. And I'm not talking politicians, I'm talking active duty Navy leadership. So that has created our stance, I think, is more from the lens of a political problem than from a medical one. I think we could, so what I'm bluntly saying is I think we could be a lot more liberal and not risk anybody's life, but there's no way that's going to happen. We will stay very conservative for those reasons. And did I miss anything? Because I'm not trying to filter any questions. Oh, no, still there's more. Where will I be the professor in naval science? I'm going to be the professor in naval science at a small school called Southern University. It's a historic black college, but I'm also the professor in naval science of a consortium, which includes LSU. So my office is on Southern University's campus, but many of my students go to Louisiana State University. Okay, barracks occupancy rate. So one of the interesting about Point Loma, which I think I touched on in my previous talks, is when we in the 80s had a lot more submarines, there was no barracks here to speak of, not like there is today. And if there were, they were brand newly built. And we had the tenders, we had all this demand. Well, the tenders went away, and we made a decision in the Navy that a lot more single sailors would live out in town. And the barracks requirement, the number of barracks rooms that I need, fell through the floor. And then as a lot of our submarines went away here in San Diego, that it got even lower. So we have been over capacity for barracks for a long time. So I was able to demolish some of the barracks over at Harbor Drive Annex, and we have, my predecessor removed one barracks building. I've removed one barracks building from service. And the goal is either repurpose them for some other purpose or to demolish them, because we just do not see a demand signal. With COVID-19, you would think that we would be using these barracks buildings to support sequestering our sailors. Well, as I mentioned earlier, our customer squadron did not feel that was an adequate solution, so they wanted their own solution. So that they weren't a customer. And we've had a couple of surface ships here in San Diego that had some problems with COVID-19, so they moved the whole crew off, sort of like what TR did. And because of the way we have our rules set up, and this is the Navy, and sometimes we can be pretty bureaucratic, the goal was to put them in our NGS rooms, more of our old BOQ hotel rooms. And we couldn't change the costing structure fast enough, but the civilian force, or the civilian team could. So we are actually ROMing a big group of sailors in hotels out in town at reduced cost to the command who had to pay the bill. So, wrap your mind around that for a while. The Navy is sending money out to a civilian hotel, even though we had capacity on our bases. But that's the approach. And it brings up an innovative approach that I've advocated, and I have my region's support, is we are very interested in privatizing our on-base hotels if they are not special. So sub-base hotel is special. It's right on the water. We plan to never get rid of it, and we'd like to use it as it is. But over at Harbor Drive Annex, there's a giant NGS over there. Just across the street is a very nice Marriott property. There's a Hampton Inn just down the way a little bit. We are competing directly with a civilian provider that can provide the same resource at a cheaper rate. We'd like to convert our facilities into some other more Navy useful purpose. And so that's the approach we're taking on that. Okay, and why they didn't want to be in the barracks rooms, that was made at a higher pay grade. I'm not really familiar with that piece. ARCO, well, like every shipyard project, it's a little bit delayed. We're anticipating it coming back this summer, but it's looking like that's tracking pretty well. Demolition of the McDonald's Hulk. Okay, unfortunately, this is being recorded. Well, it's being recorded. I'll just say it anyway. If anybody has like some heavy equipment and you just happen to run into that building, Do a very extensive investigation. That's all I'm saying. When in the glory days in 2018 of demolition money, I advocated very strongly for it to be demolished, and I wanted to turn it into a lot so we could bring in food trucks. We are very big proponents on food trucks here because it creates a lot of variety. It turns out, as I've gotten smarter in the whole fast food industry, it is extremely hard to make money on a fast food operation on Point Loma when they have to compete with a world-class galley, when they have to compete with the galleys on the submarines that do great food service, when they have to compete with my own food service place. It's very tough for them to make money. And so for that reason, they're happy to come in and squat in a defunct, ugly-looking building, but they won't put a dollar into helping make that building look like anything other than the sad McDonald's from the 80s. And so as a base CEO, I made the decision, well, we're not going to put something in there and just perpetuate it longer. What I am in conversation with is NEX, and I'm going to push forward for my relief, hopefully to pick it up as well. It'll be his choice if he wants to go down this path. Is my goal is to do a resurface, a reface on that building and turn it into a Navy exchange. So think of it like more of a quickie mart, similar to what we have on the water right now. We would then demo the one on the water, which is essentially an ugly looking steel shed building. So there's no aesthetic value to it whatsoever. That'll open up more waterfront. And I've always been pushing hard to do that as a base CEO. And what I've talked to NEX, and they're kind of slow to the punch on this, but if you're familiar with Amazon lockers, what I've told NEX is Navy Base Point Loma will only get the NEX service that it deserves for submarine sailors when we have NEX lockers. So imagine a submarine sailor, he wants a new set of Bose headphones because he's going on deployment. He puts it in there. The giant NEX over on 32nd Street, Navy Base San Diego, puts it in a box. A courier carries it over onto base, puts it in a locker, and his cell phone gives him a bing. And that day, he goes over and gets his new Bose headphones. Essentially, we could put an NEX, the biggest NEXs on any small base by doing that. And that's kind of the vision we'd have is you'd be able to buy beer there, smokes if that's still a thing. And then you'd have these lockers, and then everything else would be in an unmanned location. That's the best use of our real estate, and that's what I'm pushing forward for that going forward. And I don't have any date on the Desi boat. That's going to be up in the air until we come through the COVID thing. And our beaches are open for any recreational activity as long as you can respect social distancing. Our normal fishing areas are open. I'm answering your question, by the way. And then sailing, yep, you can launch a Hobie Cat out of here. That's okay. And sailboards are okay as well. So that takes care of that. All right, so I think I made it through all the questions. If I didn't get to your question, just shout out. I'm not trying to filter.
One question for you, Brien. Are any barracks being torn down at what we used to call the submarine base, or is it all over at the Navy Annex?
So the barracks that I slated to be torn down have been torn down, and they were only on Harbor Drive Annex. They've been converted into parking lots. I actually wanted them for some other purpose, but that's as good as we could do, is a parking lot with the money we had. We have one barracks building that was shut down a number of years ago. And one thing I've learned in this job is if you do not occupy a building, you're making a decision that you probably will need to demo it. So the environmental restoration costs because of mold and other issues in this particular barracks are in the millions of dollars bad. Just to get it back to not dangerous is millions of dollars. So that building will likely be demolished instead of reused. The building that we just shut down, I directed that they maintain some environmental controls and use of the building enough so that hopefully that doesn't happen, so we can maybe make different choices. The problem is the way these buildings are constructed, a lot of cinder block stack construction, it just make them very hard to repurpose for any other purpose. And as I already mentioned, we don't anticipate a housing requirement of that type of housing going forward.
Okay. If there's no further questions, Mr. President, I'll turn the presentation Zoom over to you for the remainder.
Okay, I think there was one more that popped up from Paul Van Bethen about where on base civilians can eat. I guess you have to take 5 still, right?
All right, great question. I'm glad someone asked that. Thank you. All right, so the Take 5 got shut down, and it didn't get shut down because of COVID per se, but when I lost my shipyard workers, I just did not have enough people to maintain a viable restaurant from an economic perspective. So when we get humans back on the base, we're going to get our Take 5 open again. And we're trying to lead that a little bit. Nothing is restricting me bringing it back, so we'll try to bring it back, but it's just economics. But the great news about this COVID, I should have led with this on COVID-19, is that our galley is open for civilian DOD employees. And I'm looking at Sharon. I don't know. I don't think we can have for retirees. I don't think we can let retirees eat there. No, we can't do that. But our civilian workers can eat in our galley because of COVID-19. And I don't anticipate changing that policy on my watch because we're still in COVID-19. There's a rule that says I can't normally do that because it competes with civilian establishments out in town. But as long as COVID-19 is an emergency, I can do that. So DON, civilian workers, and contractors can eat in our galley right now. And my relief is Ken Franklin. That question just popped up there as well. He's coming out of Naples. So boy, he's had some challenges. He's right now what's referred to as roaming, but essentially quarantine in DC before he can start his in-person school back at Scenic, and then he'll jump in the car or fly and get here, and then we'll start turnover.
Okay, Brien, thank you very much. I think everybody, we should give Brien a round of applause. And we have a farewell gift for you. And thanks for the meeting and all the support over the years. Sharon, stick your hand in there, Sharon, so people can see you again. Thank you, Sharon, for helping us out. So, Brien, you've really been a great supporter of the Submarine League. We've really appreciated all the support that we had when you were CO of Jefferson City, a deputy at the squadron, and especially as base commander. I think you've attended almost every one of the meetings. I know you've attended all of them that you've been in town for, and we really appreciate the participation and support. We're definitely going to miss you, but we wish you and Melody and the kids a fantastic time in Baton Rouge, and hopefully a smooth move and a nice drive down there later this week. And we're looking forward to the change of command.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thanks everybody, and thanks for the great gift. And it's been an honor and a privilege to associate with all of you. And God bless you all.
So as it is the custom for the Submarine League, we do not have meetings in July and August. We do have a officer planning session in August that will be, the officers will get together. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, September 8th.
Oh, one way or the other.
One way, well, it'll be there. Now, hopefully it'll be at the Ocean View, but if not, then we'll do another Zoom. I think this went reasonably well. It's nice to be able to have a Zoom session and have people from out of town be able to attend. Plus, since we recorded it, we'll be able to put it up on the website so people can actually watch it that weren't able to be here. I also want to express my thanks to Steve Andrews for agreeing to run for vice president. We appreciate his participation. He's been active in the meetings, and I know Sam both appreciate him stepping up to take on the vice president's role. I also wanted to thank Jeff Hiscox, who's the Command Master Chief of the squadron, for all the support he's given us, and we're wishing him the best as he moves back to Kings Bay, Georgia, and looking forward to having Nick Green, who is the Command Master Chief on the Scranton, as the new squadron CMC. I also want to thank our treasurer, Keith Fargo, for agreeing to continue to serve. And especially want to thank our secretary, Charlie McVeigh, a past president of the council, for all of the work that he does. And I want to thank Bruce Freer for stepping up and volunteering to help out with some of the activities and do a little in-job or on-the-job training to hopefully relieve Charlie next year. And last person I really want to thank as well is Jeff Fishback for all the work he does on the website and getting videos up there, posting meeting notices and everything else. Does anybody else have anything else they want to raise before we conclude the meeting?
There was a question about someone who liked the Zoom and it really helps.
It'd be nice to have a Zoom option moving forward. So we'll look at whether we can do that live or not. For those of you that have been at the Ocean View, you may notice that coverage there sometimes is a little flaky, but we'll look at what we can do.
Maybe we'll do that.
Maybe we can do that.
Yeah.
So we'll see what we can do. We do have a wide spread of membership across the Western U.S. and we appreciate your membership. And we're glad we're able to bring you something that you could attend without having to come to San Diego. Any other questions anybody has before we close the meeting?
Yeah, I just want to say I enjoyed it very much, and I look forward to the day when I retire. I'll come join y'all over there.
Okay, great. Jeff, you have something?
Yeah, I'll keep the Zoom session open for a little bit. I'll turn off the recording feature, but I'll keep it open if there's any of you shipmates that want to chat with each other after seeing each other for the first time in many years, in some cases. So after Bruce secures the meeting, like I said, I'll leave it running for a little bit. Okay.
Good. Okay, with that, the meeting is concluded. Thank you all for attending today, and have a great week.
Okay, good.